Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all out to our January meeting. We're grateful that you're here, and we appreciate seeing you. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll have a Pledge of Allegiance by Amy Tergaskus and an invocation by Stacy Anderson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to bring us all together to celebrate the successes of our students and our staff. Please guide us as we enter this new year as a board and as a community to reach the goals that we have set for ourselves. And we thank the community members for their generosity and look forward to the new school year. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. 1.2, election of board officers for 2018. So I'll entertain a motion for someone to be nominated as the board president.
I move that we nominate John Larson as the board president.
I second the motion.
Is this where we get to discuss?
No, there's no discussion.
But I really, can I say something before we do this, or do I not?
You have a motion in a second, Mr. President?
I do. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
There you go.
No.
Yes.
No.
So I really think that there are other people that would do a great job and have the opportunity to grow. Would be really good, I think.
I think you've done a good job as a board president, John. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, but I think there are other people that would do just as well. And the opportunity is there to have that opportunity. You're going to make me call this?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Can I oppose? No. Okay. Am I allowed to make a nomination? Am I?
You are.
Okay, so I'm not.
I would nominate Stacy to be the whatever it is, vice president of the board.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. I'll entertain a motion for clerk, if we'd like to have a clerk.
Do we need a clerk?
Does that mean we don't need a clerk? We don't? Okay. Moving on. 1.3, conflict of interest statements.
Just make sure that I have them, and I think I do, so we're good.
I believe everybody turned one in. Okay. 1.4, approval of meeting dates, times, and locations for the 2018 regular board meetings.
That's
Motion.
the list in the front of the board book.
Yeah, so basically it's staying on the second Thursday of the month. We'll
6:30.
continue on at 6:30.
Here in the city council chambers.
I'm sorry?
Here in the city council chambers.
Right. Does that still work for everyone? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting dates and times.
I second the motion.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 1.5, statement of official posting locations.
And we have a posting board at the district office, and then also I post outside of the district office and on the website. And those are our official posting locations.
All three of them? Or just the,
The website and
the district
and really
office?
the district office.
Okay.
Mhm.
thank you.
No action necessary on that. Moving on to 1.6, recognition of December and January legendary staff members.
Mr. President, at this time, if we can have the board go out front, that would be great, and we'll have Mrs. Jaramillo to come up.
I'm sure you got one. And you're on TV. Stay over here first. Mr. President and members of the board and Mr. Housley, and I would like to introduce to you Annika Cotterman. Annika is our legendary staff member at Whipple Ranch. She is a music teacher and so much more. Not only is she musical, she's creative, she's organized, and just a huge asset to our school. She puts on some of the cutest musical productions with the kids. And if you haven't seen them, you've just really missed out. They are so cute. But we have some more coming up, so you'll be able to come and see how talented she is. Whenever we do our Student of the Month, she always comes up, and man, she can quiet a whole room. She's just amazing to have. I wrote down my notes about her. So beyond being a music teacher, this is what makes her more the legendary piece, because she's such an integral part of our staff. She has a willingness to do just what is right for kids. We started something, it's called All Hands on Deck. And so what it is it's a reading intervention time. It happens first thing in the morning all across the campus. We're all doing a reading intervention. So you may be a high kid, you may be a lower kid, you may be a child right in the middle. And so Annika's response to that was, how are we going to make it work? So you don't always get a lot of special area teachers that are willing to jump in there and take a small group of kids first thing in the morning and sit down and do reading interventions with us. But she sees children with a need, and she's willing to just jump in there and do it. And I just love that about her. She, I think she thinks in schedules. Like, I'll give her the parameters. I'll say, because I'm not really good with schedules, and I don't know if you know what a Judy clock is, but it's one of those little round clocks that you teach children how to do time. That's how I have to put a schedule together. But if I give Annika the parameters and say, okay, we need this and this and this, she's the first one. She'll say, yes, I'll take it. I'll take a group of teachers, and we'll put together a schedule. She does a great job with that. And she is my PR person. So anything that I send to the White Mountain Independent, you've got to know it's really Annika that's doing it. I'll get things together and she'll get them in there. And so she's my PR gal. So the other day, we were thinking, oh, it's going to snow, and hoping it's going to be, at least 2 or 3 foot of snow. And maybe we're going to have a late start. So I said, Annika, can you throw together a late start schedule? Yep. And it was right back to me, probably within an hour. I always like to ask kids, what do you think of Miss Cotterman? So, I've told you before, they tell you the truth. And so here's what they said about her. She plays games. She's a really good singer. She tells stories and she plays with drums. And she is kind and she's fun. And she's that and so much more. And so blessed to have her in our district and at our school. This is our Annika Cotterman.
Thank you. Thank you.
You gotta come up here.
Oh, okay.
You gotta get a picture and a hug.
Okay.
You gotta hug everybody first.
Okay. Oh, okay, we'll take the photo. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're good. Thank you.
Mr. President, we had a delay in the certificates, so those will be delivered to the staff at their sites. Now invite Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall, do you have someone here? I'm sorry, Dr. Dorset. I'm sorry, Mr. Hall.
All right, good evening, board members and Mr. Housley. Today with me for legendary staff, I have Judy Evans. I also had another teacher, but I'm gonna save her for next month. Her kiddo's sick. So I'm gonna brag on Judy a little bit here. She's language arts teacher at my school. She also is the PLC lead. So she leads her department in meetings and data analysis, curriculum, all kinds of stuff. So she does a great job doing that. She's an excellent teacher, well loved by her students. So this go around, I have these tickets that students and staff and parents and the like can put into the box up front. And I think it was somebody's writing project. And because I had hundreds of them in the box for last month, it was amazing. So with Mrs. Evans, I was like, okay, what do I do with all these? I can't just necessarily grab one. I want to see who got how many, right? And Mrs. Evans got a very thick stack. It was probably quadruple anybody else's. So she's well loved by sixth graders in particular, and by staff as well.
Oh,
so
thank you.
So from staff, I have a admirer of yours. I'm going to read what this person said. Miss Evans is the epitome of a professional educator who is passionate about her teaching and widely adored by her students. I find that student admiration to be truly exceptional because while I have observed that she is able to maintain an extremely well-managed classroom and keep the students engaged and accountable, she is also able to provide a nurturing environment. And then that the students and the staff of our school truly respect Mrs. Evans and appreciate her many admirable qualities that make her an exceptional teacher. Another said that she's consistently kind to all, and she's the PLC leader who keeps our department on task and functioning at high levels. So big nod for that. And I actually put them all in an envelope because I'm gonna read a few though, because they're just cute. For one student, she says that she likes you for being inspirational and making me really think about how I act and being a teacher for the kids and not the money and really caring about us. Another says, for always being my favorite teacher, you're nice, and I love coming to your class. You're an awesome teacher, you're understanding, and you're the best teacher I've ever had. So, and another says that you are there to teach us, talk to us, and push us to learn. And then another says, thank you for being my favorite teacher. I'm so thankful for having you fifth hour last year. I miss you a lot. You're still my favorite teacher still. Thank you for teaching us and letting another student and I joke around with you. Love you. Also, thanks for letting me talk in third person. And then another, helping me in school and not only being a great teacher, but a friend. She taught me a lot, and she made my bad days good days. So obviously she's touched the heart not only of staff, myself, and the students at our junior high. So Mrs. Evans, our legendary staff. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're welcome. All right, let's go shake.
Okay.
One, two, three. One more. Thank you.
Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much. Appreciate what you do for our children, all of you. 1.7, call to the audience. Did we have any tonight? No? 1.8, future board agenda items. Do we have anything that you feel like we need to? Okay. 2.1, approval of overnight out-of-state travel. Mr. Housley?
Mr. President, we have a number of things here. Most of them are just regular in nature. Mr. Adams is requesting an approval for Cynthia Whipple to take the Showbiz students, there's 30 of them, to the NAU festival in February. That is paid for through the choir activity account. He's also requesting that they take the band and choir of 20 to 30 students, as well as orchestra, to the EAC Honor Festival in Thatcher. That's January 30th and 31st. Tax credit, band, and choir activity funds are funding that. Mrs. Ramsey is also requesting for Mrs. Farnsworth to take her 6 students in the robotic club that you got to meet last meeting to the state championship in Phoenix on February 23rd and 24th. Tax credit is funding that trip. Mr. Adams and Mr. Nicholas are also requesting the spring sports travel for overnight and out of state. And all that information is included in your board packet with track, softball, baseball, other spring sports. There's quite a bit in there, so that's available for you. I would recommend these overnight and out-of-state travel as presented.
I'll make a motion that we approve the overnight and out-of-state travel as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion in 2 seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 2.2, approval of splitting Linden third grade class. Mr. Housley.
Part of the blessing of having increased student capacity is that classes grow, and third grade in Linden has for a little while now has been at about 36, and it's holding steady. It is the recommendation, my recommendation, that we split those 2 classes. We have a long-term substitute in Mrs. Ann Hall, who would fill that position and serve through the remainder of the year. And then at the end of the year, we'll reevaluate whether we need to continue. We'll bring a recommendation at that time to the board if we need to continue a full-time position or if there's not a need at that time.
I motion for the approval to split the Linden third grade class.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 2.3, approval of 1819 school calendar. Mr. Housley.
Mr. President of the board, we discussed at our last meeting two proposals very similar in nature. We were asked to go and do a survey. We conducted a survey of about 10 questions. One kind of was the question that you're looking for the answer to. And unfortunately, from the survey, it doesn't give you necessarily a definitive answer. The surveys were as split as our conversation might have been in the last board meeting. And so if we, just looking at that survey data, I believe it's loading right now, but the question was on spring break, whether to have it on the 11th through the, I'm sorry, I just lost the date in my mind, the 11th through the 15th, or to have it on the 18th through the 22nd. The first option gave us a short third period, or third quarter, of about 43 days, which would be the shortest of all 4 quarters in the school year, and make the last quarter 48 days. That change in that week. The other option would make the third quarter the longer, the 48, give more instructional days there. The thought was with state testing in April, that might be a good idea, and then have a shorter fourth quarter of 43 days. It came back, like I said, 53% for the 18th through the 22nd, and just over 47% there for the 11th through the 15th. I will note the information that we didn't have at the last meeting when we were discussing this was we knew that MPC's dates were on the 11th through the 15th. NAVET's calendar has come out since our last board meeting, and they also, as anticipated, they connected their calendar to that of MPC. One of the questions raised last board meeting was how many students were affected by the calendars of MPC and NAVET. And if Mr. Adams, if I get this wrong, please correct me, but I believe it's about, under this year's schedule, it would be about 80 students. Is that correct, Mr. Adams? 80 to 100 students. So obviously, we've mentioned that those 80 are reflected out more. If I'm a junior student in NAVET and I have 6 siblings, obviously it affects that family. So just wanted to point that out. As far as the survey, it didn't give us much of a recommendation. It did if you just go sheer on those numbers, but that's pretty much 50-50 in my mind. It has been a tradition in the district to stay online with NPC and NAVET, and it's my intention to visit with the superintendent's group that I'm involved with more in depth, that includes NPC and NAVET, to see about calendar alignments in the future and how we might look at that. It may be in the best interest of the district to continue that relationship, at least until we can make further decisions down the road. Mr. President, if there's any other information you might like, that's kind of where I feel like we're at.
And you're saying the MPC is the 11th through the 15th?
Yes, sir.
Personally, my only worry is putting the it's difficult to ask those families to have 2 different spring breaks. You know, I would feel awful if they weren't able to go do something with their families because they had to be here over both spring breaks. That's my concern, but I'm also concerned with having a longer, more involved fourth quarter when all of the testing is going on. So I'm a little torn on this.
I'm the same way. I remember as a student, I hated the fourth quarter because it was just like you couldn't get a breath of fresh air. There was no way out. You know, it was just kind of had to
Once it started,
yeah. And of course, that was back when we used it for snow days too. But I don't know. I'm torn too, because if I had one of my students was involved in dual enrollment or NAVET, I would want them to be able to have spring break with the rest of the families. So.
Amy?
I know one of the issues that was brought the last meeting was instructional days, and I don't know, I have some thoughts on that. I think that I have confidence in our teachers. I think that the time before testing, if it was longer in the fourth quarter, it's a good review time before testing. I don't think that our teachers would say that they teach to a test though either. So I don't think that to me, that's a wash. But then, Mr. Housley, I think that you said on the survey that the staff voted also,
Yes.
and that they were more in favor of the 43 days in the third quarter.
Yeah, there were 107 staff respondents. In those 107 responses, let me just get the number for you real quick, I'm sorry. 41 of those 107 said that they would prefer the 11th through the 15th. and 66 of the 107 said that they would prefer the 18th through the 22nd.
Which is still pretty close to split,
Yes.
isn't it? I just personally, I would lean towards doing things that would keep families more together. So 80 to 100 kids times one sibling is 200. If they've got, 3 kids in the family, then that's 300 kids. We're affecting a lot of families. I really do hope that we can visit with MPC to align so that they're more academically sound instead of just picking a break in the middle of the semester. I don't know. I would love some more collaboration with MPC, but I like the 11th through the 15th. That's what I'm leaning towards, but I can go either way. Those are my thoughts. My thoughts are families, families. I don't know.
I feel the same way as you guys. Yeah, I'd like it if Shad would collaborate with MPC because I think it's only been 2 years, hasn't it, Farrell? This will be the second year since they switched it, and they didn't really have a reason for doing it, right? They just shifted it and didn't really think about
Everyone else.
Yeah, so.
Mr. President, if it makes it easier, my recommendation would be to continue aligning ourselves with them until we can have further discussions, and then our proposal for 19 and 20, hopefully we'll take into the other things that we're struggling with right now and be able to make that happen.
With that said, I'll entertain the motion anytime somebody wants to do that.
I move that we do what Mr. Housley recommended and choose the calendar with the spring break on the 11th through the 15th.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. 2.4, presentation of student achievement. Mr. Housley?
Mr. President, I'll invite Mrs. Clark to come down. We want to just share just a little bit of student data. We know we've talked a little bit about it. Just briefly, before Christmas, we had our second benchmark, and I want to share just 2 data points with you, and then allow you to ask some questions. But Mrs. Clark has some information on how we use this data, and I think that's most important, is how we're using this data not only to affect student achievement, but to make instructional decisions, to guide our instructional practices, to just to be better overall systematically. And so if you'll notice on the data, and Mrs. Clark, you want to share just real quick about the growth to target?
Sure. So in a minute, when we have the data in front of us, you're going to see a column that has percentages of growth. And the student growth target values were set using a formula that's in the testing system that we have that reflects proficiency or mastery to a growth target. So the students are expected to demonstrate achievement growth to a predetermined proficiency or mastery level over the course of the year. So right now we're comparing the first quarter benchmark as our pre-assessment, and then the second quarter benchmark as our post-assessment. When we take the third quarter benchmarks, that will get pushed out. But basically, we're looking at an established minimum of 65% and maximum of 80% rather values of what the post-assessment should be for students, and then we look at where they fall. So the percentages that you're looking at, it's that right-hand column, was calculated by taking the number of students in a particular grade level or content area that met or exceeded that proficiency growth target between that 65% and 80% threshold, and then I divided it by the total number of students that participated in the exam. So for example, when you look at the This is second through fifth grade that we're looking at, and they're in order. So you have second grade math, and then ELA third, fourth, and fifth. That top box, the blue, reflects math in second grade. We see that 63.33% of second graders that participated in the exam met or exceeded that proficiency or mastery growth target. So we're encouraged by a high number in that category because it means our kids are making gains over the course of the year.
This growth to target could be exhibited by someone who is highly proficient, and it could be someone who is deficient and might have, it's all based on where they're at, right? So someone with a learning disability who struggles with the concept, if they show growth, they could be in the meets to exceed the growth target because their target is based on where they're at. So these numbers aren't just reflective of kids who did really well on the test. It could be someone who did moderately well on the test, but yet met the growth target. Okay. So that data is in front of you, and are there any questions about those data? There's 3 slides there, 2 through 5, grades 6 through 8. You'll notice those things there, and then the high school 9 through 12, algebra, algebra 1, 2, geometry, and then our English classes there.
So the column on the left is the number of students in the second quarter benchmark that passed the exam. And we set the passing rate at 80% is considered achieving mastery or passing. So these are students that achieved to that threshold. Was it 80 or 70? I think it was 80 is what we set. Then again, the right-hand column is students that met or exceeded the growth target for mastery or
So if they
proficiency.
took the assessment and the first time out of 100%, they got a 20%. But they're, however you figure, they should have grown 10% and they ended up getting a 40. They would be, because they exceeded, they didn't get 30, they got 40. So they would be in that right-hand column.
Correct.
Okay.
And this is a measurement that's being used in our AZ merit scores, and it was one of the most confusing, the growth to target. So if I'm a 5th grader who performs at this level, demonstrates this amount of mastery, by the time I'm 3 years down the road at 8th grade, where should I be? And if you meet that growth incrementally, then you hit the growth target. And that's what we're demonstrating here.
How do they figure that with the end of course tests in the high school?
It's
Do they?
pretty complicated, but yeah, it's not.
I think it's a norm referenced formula when you get to the end of course assessments.
Okay.
So I wanted to say too, Amy, you talked about a student that maybe didn't pass the exam but exhibited growth. The other thing you need to think about too is we have a small percentage of students that exceed the mastery in terms of passing the exam. So maybe they're getting an 80 or 90 overall. So they have low growth from exam to exam, but they're passing. So in an AZ merit situation, what we would be looking at is students who are considered proficient or highly proficient. That's one scoring category towards our school letter grades. And then the growth to target for that student might be on a lower level, which is another component that Mr. Housley was talking about. So, it's tricky. You want the students to have high achievement, but we also celebrate that high growth as well.
So we use this data in one way you look at the data and the tendency would be to say, oh, we didn't do so hot, or there's a lot that comes from this, and just looking at that, you think about the students behind those numbers and are they growing? Did a special needs kid grow significantly? Well, you might find that inside some of that data. Did we have what growth took place? And so we use that data in a lot of ways. Mrs. Clark can share kind of how she's been working with the PLC teams to interpret some of that data.
So at the end of first quarter, we had a team that came together. Those were all the grade level and department level leaders. And we broke down the data in two parts. First, we looked at scores like this. Now, we didn't have a growth score then because we only had the baseline assessment, but we looked at the students' mastery rate. And we talked about things like, what trends did we notice? Where were there pockets of students that had high mastery? Things like that. And so now that we have this second piece of data and we can look at growth, could you go back to the 6 through 8 slide, please? I want to talk specifically about 8th grade English Language Arts, which is the very last row there, that bottom pink, the ones that are both 60. So I'm going to use that one as an example. So in a situation where a professional learning community or PLC team of teachers comes together and they look at their data, they might say, oh, look, we had a high number of students that passed the exam, right, that were proficient or highly proficient, because 68.7% of 8th graders that took the exam passed. And for us, that's an improvement over the benchmark scores, the district scores from last year. But we also see with 8th grade, we have a high level of growth. So they actually have the highest growth in the district, that 8th grade ELA. So we have to look at that kind of trend overall. As a teacher, I might break down those scores individually. Maybe that's going to guide how I'm going to reteach my students or how I'm going to group them for review, things like that. Something that came out of our data dig in the second quarter, after we'd given that first quarter benchmarks, was, what is it about the exam? The teachers started kind of saying, we'd like to have a look at some of these. We understand where students are with regard to the proficiency or mastery of a specific standard of learning, for example, identifying main idea or, identifying the argument in a piece. But when we look at kind of that next step is looking at the exam itself and breaking the questions down. What we noticed is, in particular with the new testing system that we're able to use and our students participate in an online district benchmark, much like AZ Merit is administered through an online portal and the students are on a computer, the questions are a little bit different. So if you consider that before in a multiple choice situation, there's one correct answer, but under kind of this new testing model, students are pulling maybe a couple of different choices. So in a list of distractors, say 6, the question stem might ask the student to choose the 3 best answers. And so now instead of one correct answer, the students need to choose 3. So maybe part of it is the students aren't used to the testing format. That could be a reason where we're seeing some trends in data where we think as a teacher, well, I taught that standard. In a classroom assessment, when we gave a common formative assessment across our grade level, the kids did well, but when they took the benchmark, we're seeing a different result. Why is that? So that's one piece. Maybe the students aren't used to the question format. Also, maybe another component is this idea that students have these technology embedded questions. So when we go into an assessment online, the students are given a prompt and they have to drag and drop the answers. Or maybe they have to go in and key in a math problem. That's not something they're used to because before it was multiple choice. So even in an online format, you just click the answer and you're done. So to what extent does the technology embedded question become an issue? So one thing we noticed was after the first quarter benchmark, teachers made some decisions about, hey, we want to include this vocabulary in our classroom instruction and our classroom assessments. Or maybe we want to start giving assessments where we include a question where there's more than one right answer, and we're asking students to choose the best 3 of 6, something like that. I know at the junior high, with regard to these 8th grade scores, that language arts team decided after the first benchmark that they wanted to target some very specific standards and some very specific test question formats. And they gave a document to their entire school and said, hey, could you just use these in your classroom over the next quarter? And so when we look at the growth that we had in 8th grade ELA, which is reading, basically I'm thinking from a global viewpoint, maybe some of that can be attributed to just embedding those kinds of questions or that kind of vocabulary into the students' instruction every day. Something that we noticed after giving this last benchmark, could we go to the high school slide, please? We noticed with the 11th grade English, we had kind of a lower passing rate than we were anticipating, and only 8.95% of students met their growth to target. So in reflection of that, we need to look at outside factors. So we have those factors inside the classroom. What did we teach? How did we teach it? We have kind of mitigating internal factors like the test questions, as I talked about. And then you have those external factors. What else is going on in the school? If I let Mr. Adams sit up here and talk to you, he would tell you that that particular week of benchmark testing, there were 3 basketball games. So that involves a large number of students. They were all trying to get their tests done ahead of time. 2 of those games were out of town, more than 3 hours away. So we had students, for example, on a Tuesday night, travel away. So they leave school early in the day. They go to their game, they play, they get home, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and then they have to report to school the next day, and maybe they're taking an exam right away. So to what extent, moving forward, can we make sure that our benchmark schedule accommodates for those students? Maybe we do some pull-out, we test them early, those kinds of things. And those are all factors that we can control. We can control the method of instruction, we can control those classroom assessments, and to some extent, we can control the schedule. So moving forward, we want to look at this data and really and dig deep with it again. The teachers have a protocol document that was created for the data dig that they can use to kind of guide that conversation and get them to a place where they can say, okay, where are our students now? What are the factors contributing to their success? And how can we modify that moving forward to make sure they have a positive testing experience?
Thank you. Any questions from the board? It's just not just the numbers, and there's a lot of things that we're trying to pull from the data, and our PLC teams are doing a wonderful job at that, and we're excited about where that's going to lead us in the near future and in the long term. So thank you, Mrs. Clark.
I just have to say that this is new to us, and it is really great for us to have these numbers, have this data in front of us that we can actually have you explain to us so we know what that means and we know where our kids, where the emphasis needs to be. And I just really appreciate that a lot. Thank you. .1, approval of resignations. Mr. Housley.
Mr. President, we have a resignation for your consideration this evening. Effective 12/19/17, our high school golf coach, Caleb Davis. My recommendation that we approve this resignation at this time.
I'll make a motion for the approval of resignations.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I do. I just wish that I could vote no and he would have to stay here. But I know it's a good opportunity for him, but I think he's done a good job as the head golf coach. He'll be missed.
Yes.
I agree. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 3.2, approval of hiring and transfers. Mr. Housley.
Mr. President, we have one transfer for your consideration, and that is Jamie Schuff from food service worker, 5.5 hour to a 7-hour position. That was a position that we had open, and that would be effective 1/15/18, so next week.
I motion for the approval of resignations as presented.
Hiring transfers.
Oh, sorry, hiring transfers.
Second anyway.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 3.2, approval of stipends, volunteers. Mr. Housley.
It's this time of year, so there are several of those listed for you in your packet. I won't go through them. It's pretty cumbersome, but these are for junior high track, high school baseball, softball, track, and then volunteers for the same, including high school golf. It's my recommendation that we approve these stipends, volunteers, and event workers as outlined.
I motion for approval of stipends, volunteers, and event workers as presented.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 3.3, approval of certified and classified substitutes. Mr. Housley.
Mr. President, we have some certified and classified individuals for substitutes for your consideration, and we ask that you would approve them as outlined in your board packet.
I motion for approval of stipends as recommended.
Certified and classified substitutes.
Yes.
You know, yeah, of course, yeah.
Sorry.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 5.1, approval of school board declaration for future school board facilities board projects. Mr. Schubert.
Yes, sir. Every year we bring before you a request for a declaration from the board for the district to be able to use the stamp of the board president for our school facilities board projects. Without the use of that stamp, those projects would have to be on hold until a board meeting where you would go ahead and approve. So we ask again for this year for your declaration that the district office can use the stamp of the newly re-elected president to move SFB projects forward.
I move that we approve that.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 5.2, approval of bid award to Canyon State Bus Sales to purchase 4 rear-engine buses, 4 conventional buses, and 1 full-size special ed bus. Mr. Schubert.
Yes, sir. At this time, I'd like to invite the representative from Canyon State Bus Sales, as well as our Maintenance and Transportation Director, Mr. West, up to the podium so that they are able to answer any questions that you may have. Also, we have a small presentation as well from the representative from Canyon State Bus Sales to give you a little bit more background information about their buses and some of the features that apply.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this recommendation. We are very excited for the opportunity to enter into this partnership with this district. Excuse me. We understand the importance of pupil transportation in and out. It's a very large decision. It's a large amount of money. They're giant billboards that have the school's name on them and are seen every day by the public. So we understand. Most importantly, though, it's about transporting students to and from school safely and to the activities as well. So we're very excited, and again, we appreciate the opportunity. I've joked with Mr. West, if this does get approved and we enter into the partnership, we've just begun a family together with the buses being the children, and I intend on that relationship being very positive so that I am welcome on the holidays when we show back out. So at this time, I've given you a packet that outlines some of the features of our buses, a list of districts in the area that are also customers of ours with contact information, so you could reach out to them for reference if you so desire. And then also just the sheet that was in the actual bid as well, so you could review that. And at this time, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Can you discuss, in the packet that you handed out, there's some safety testing that your company does with their buses. Can you go ahead and describe what that testing is?
Yes, and it's lined out in here. These are things Mr. Schubert is talking about is the Colorado rack test and the Kentucky pole test. The Colorado rack test, there was a very unfortunate accident back in the 70s where a bus rolled over on its top and there were several fatalities on the bus because the roof collapsed in. So Colorado enacted some regulations that said if this were to happen again and a bus ended up on its top the emergency exit windows, the doors, any way out of the bus, if it is on its top, still need to be able to be fully operational. There are 8 states in the nation that require this. Arizona is not one of them. The list is in here: Colorado, Arkansas, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, West Virginia, Georgia, and Alabama. Bluebird took it upon themselves. They said, if these 8 states require it, we will just make it a standard feature on all of our buses, because why should the students in those 8 states be safer in transportation than the rest of the states? The other one is also a Kentucky pole test, similar but different. If you took an 8-inch pole and it fell onto the top of the bus, and it had such an impact that it would actually dent the roof of the bus 8 to 10 inches, the body panels on the bus, the skin of the bus, is not allowed to separate. It must remain intact. That way debris, water, anything else, protection of the pupils would be intact as well. So those are 2 features that come standard to ensure the safety and protection of your students.
Can you explain a little bit between a rear engine and conventional bus, please?
Yes, so the rear engine, those are the ones I like to call the Twinkies, or most people call them flat nose. They're very long, the ends are flat. The engine is, for lack of a better term, in the bus. It's in the rear of the bus. It's separated from the compartment where the students are. Where the conventional bus looks more like your standard truck. The engine is out front. It has the hood that pulls open. So there are different advantages to each of those. The rear engine bus is able to put in a larger engine. So we typically see those used for trips, long distance, or any time you need to really climb a hill, because it has more horsepower and it has more torque, which gives those buses the ability to climb those hills more easily. Are there any other questions? Did I get it?
So that'll get us up and down the mountain.
It will, it will. Unfortunately, you're still not gonna fly 75 up the mountain. A bus is a bus, but you also won't go 25 miles an hour up the hill as well. If somebody cuts you off, you should have the ability to re-accelerate up the hill, which is nice. We understand no one wants to get stuck behind the bus.
Anybody else have any other questions?
I think so.
You have anything for us?
No, just, with what we were talking about, the rear engines and conventionals, the reason we want to get the rear engines that we're getting with the larger engines with the transmission is because we spend a lot of our time with our field trips down in the valley. And with those rear engines coming up that Beeline Hill or whatever, it'll have the better capacity to get our children up the hill in a more timely manner, in a safe manner, without having them stranded on the side of the highway.
And just as a point of clarification, all of these buses will have the underneath storage. And the difference between the conventional buses and the rear engine is the rear engine will have a straight pass-through. It'll go all the way through, where the rear engine will go halfway through on both sides. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. The rear engine, on a conventional, the engine is in the front, and the drive line runs to the back to turn the axle. On the rear engine, the engine is in the rear, so we don't have the drive line. So they're able to put 122 cubic feet of storage space as opposed to around 50 cubic feet of storage space. So duffel bags, coolers, a cello, all those things you can slide under the bus and help keep and reduce things in the compartment of the bus during travel.
Maybe you already talked about this and I just have already forgotten. Can you talk about what went into the bid process for the public?
Yes, I can go. On December 1st, what do we do? We put out an invitation to bid to all the vendors. And with that, we set up a pre-bid meeting, and we were able to discuss the specifications and everything else. We had 3 vendors attend that meeting. We had Canyon State Bus Sales, we had Auto Safety House, and we had RWC. In conjunction with the specs that we had already designed, those 3 vendors worked with the district to actually make them more reasonable specifications, such as we wanted a specific engine, but it didn't come with this transmission. So the 3 vendors all helped us design these bids, or these specifications. On December 15th, we had a formal bid opening. State procurement rules require that anything over $100,000 has to be a sealed bid. So we had that sealed bid opening. We asked our vendors to provide us with pricing in 2 different formats. We had them price out the buses, and if they were on a procurement contract, to provide us with the procurement contract pricing as well. That way we could compare, apples to apples. What we did find is that the contract pricing was much higher than what we could get for them bidding it outright. Because when they bid on a state contract, they are locked into that number that they gave to whoever that procurement company is, whether it be 1GPA, Mojave, or any of the state of Arizona purchasing. So it's whatever they set up with those vendors is the number that they had to give. And what we did see, like I said, was that the prices that when they actually bid the product out came in beneath what their contracted prices were. So we did that on December 15th. We convened after, let's see, the 15th was Friday, so on the 18th, we had a 4-member panel. We had Mr. Housley, Mr. West, Mr. Glenn Price, our mechanic, and myself go through and evaluate the bids. One of the first things that we did was we performed a purchasing matrix, and that just gave different point levels to each of the vendor based on certain criterias. There were 11 items on that criteria, each one worth a maximum of 10 points. One of the things to note is that in our entire bid price, or our entire bid packet, the word price is only mentioned once, and that is comparable pricing with the other vendors. That is the only time we used the terminology price. And we went through, we evaluated each of the vendors first, and then we broke into their bids. What are they including in their base price as far as the options that we were looking for. To give an example, Canyon State, they included the Allison transmission and the Cummins diesel software in their base price, where the other vendors didn't include it in their base, but they had it as an add-on, which was something that we required. That way our mechanic could easily diagnose problems with the transmissions and drop in any engine problems. After going through all that, we added up the total in each separate category. So we looked for a grand total for a rear engine bus, then we looked for a grand total on a conventional bus, then we looked for a grand total on the large special ed bus, and then we looked for a grand total on the special ed Class A buses. What we found with the options that we required, Canyon State for their rear engine buses, they came in with a grand total of $165,884 per bus. Auto Safety House, and just so I can put this on record, Canyon State has the Bluebird bus. Auto Safety House, which has the Thomas bus, came in at $173,152. And RWC, which has the International bus, came in at $164,481. So we did not go with the lowest bid on that, but with what was included in the price and the total cost of ownership with the product from Canyon State, it is a better value for the district.
With the matrix you were using?
Yes.
Okay.
And the same thing with the conventional bus. Canyon State came in at $137,427. Auto Safety House came in at $138,361. And RWC came in at $125,474. For the large special ed bus, Canyon State came in at $142,959. Auto Safety House came in at $145,870. And RWC came in at $134,574. On the smaller Class A special ed buses, Canyon State came in at $88,419. Auto Safety House came in at $75,795. And we have 2 different bids from RWC on those. One is with a lift and the other is with a ramp. The lift came in at $73,308, and the ramp came in at $87,547. So that's how we went ahead and made our determinations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We appreciate your presentation. I don't know if there's any other questions. Members of the board, we taking into consideration the needs of the district and the ability to look at safety, cost of ownership, longevity. It is our recommendation this evening to award the approval of the bids for the sale of those, the 4 rear, the 4 conventional, and the 1 full-size special ed to Canyon State, and that would be our recommendation this
I
evening.
have another question. How do we pay for these? I know that what the answer is, but I would like you to tell everybody, how do we pay for these and when do we get the buses?
Great question.
Estimate.
So we, as we're all familiar, we were fortunate to pass our bond. As soon as bond, we had budgeted about 1.7 million for our fleet, including White and other fleets, and this is under that purchase amount. And so the buses will be put on order. They take about 6 months or so to order and to build. Unfortunately, with a bus, you can't go down to the dealership and pick it up and drive it home. They build them out to our specifications, and the intent would have those to be on the road for the first day of school. And as soon as bond proceeds or bond is sold, and then the proceeds are received by the district, then we will pay for those buses.
So because we passed the bond, doesn't mean we have the money.
Right, the bonds have to be sold to investors who will hold those bonds for the term of the bond, and we will have the proceeds available to us as soon as they're sold. And that should take place in February, March timeframe.
And any chance we could have one for the 4th of July parade?
That would be up to the vendor.
Vendor.
That request has been made. I will have, we hope so. We hope that it will be. We'll have more information once we know.
So just correct me if I'm wrong, just so I can help them out with their timeline. What happens is once they make an approval, we talk with you, we create a purchase order for the items. You create the order goes to North Carolina.
We are in Fort Valley, Georgia.
Fort Valley, Georgia. Okay, so the order will go to Georgia, they'll build the buses in Georgia, then they'll transport them back here. That's when they will go ahead and put on the extra options like our drop-down snow chains. That'll be
Camera
it.
system.
So the cameras, everything, all of our options will then be put onto the bus at their location here in Glendale, and then we would take delivery after that.
Super. Thank you.
So if there's no further questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for the approval to award the bid to Canyon State for the buses.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. 5.3, approval to purchase 2 special ed Class A buses from Auto Safety House.
This time I'd like to invite the vendor from Auto Safety House to the podium.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Browning with Auto Safety House out of Holbrook. We are the Thomas dealer for the state of Arizona. I have 2 pamphlets for you. You can pass them around and look at them. These are the Type A's that you're looking at getting. So the Type A, the Minotaur, is Thomas's smallest bus they make, but it's a same technology and manufacturing that goes into our largest bus that we build. The roof bows extend all the way from skirt to skirt, all the way across the top. They're a solid piece. As far as safety goes, they're one of the safest buses on the road. Most buses are really safe. Ours are just the same. The way the roof bow extends past the floor of the bus down to the edge of the skirts impedes any vehicles from going all the way underneath and causing that bus to flip. With the rec test that Brian mentioned earlier, we set a HDX, it's a transit bus, on top of our bus, and it holds it. You can look it up online at Thomas website if you'd like to. So they're a great bus, and on behalf of Auto Safety House, Thomas Built Bus, we appreciate the recommendation from Mr. Schubert, Mr. West here, for the purchase of those 2 buses.
Jeremy, can you talk real quick about the interior of the bus and how like a wheelchair would be strapped in?
So on the buses that we quoted you, there are anchor points inside the bus. They'll come with Sherlock straps that mount inside the anchor points to lock down your wheelchair. The lift will be at the rear of the bus, I believe. So it'll be a Braun lift that comes on the bus. Can hold up to 2 or 3 wheelchairs spots if needed. The clearance height, which is great inside this bus, is 73 inches interior. So it's pretty tall. Some of the tallest people can fit in that bus. It's 6'1" on the inside of that bus.
Mr. President, one thing I wanted to share with the board is why would we need the smaller buses for our special needs kids? A lot of special needs students require door-to-door service, and in our roads in the White Mountains, we have a lot of dirt roads, a lot of if you take my road, for example, there's a lot of washboard and large ruts, and especially as you go through the winter, and then we come out of winter and it dries up, or hopefully gets wet first, right? But then it dries up. It becomes a pretty difficult road for a traditional special ed bus to drive on. These would offer us a little softer ride, a little more pleasant, and these will handle those roads a little bit better, is our opinion, and it gives us a more affordable option for those kids who need that door-to-door service. And
You said it'll hold 3 wheelchairs?
Yes.
And how many children?
I believe we ordered or quoted 12 passenger.
12 passenger plus the 3 wheelchairs?
Yes. Also, and then since they're smaller, they're easier to maneuver in tight spots if you're going to the door-to-door service as well.
One of the other things about this bus is the location of the wheelchair spots. They will actually be between the wheels, so it'll be a smoother ride for those students that are in the wheelchair versus, locations that are in the back where they're getting the bounce and everything else from the roads. So these locations will actually be between the tires. That way they can have a smoother ride.
Are these just additions, or are these replacing buses that we have? These
These are additions.
Okay.
Our special needs program is growing in the district, and we don't have the capacity to meet the needs of those students. A lot of our special needs students currently ride in our transit style or general education buses. They're transporting together. It works, but we need to have more buses to get those students in their own environment, so that they can continue to progress in the schools. The other thing about these Type A's that we like is these are gas engines, and they accelerate. So when you're coming off, if you're in Clay Springs and you're coming back on the highway, it will accelerate to highway speeds as if it was your normal car, versus the longer style buses that take a little bit longer to respond, and the braking time is also reduced.
I'm so thankful to the community that we can do this. I think this is wonderful.
I wanted to thank the vendors for their consideration in their bids. I think they all gave great consideration, and the fact that the bids came in to a point where it builds some capacity so that we can make other choices, or even further our dollar to meet our needs in the district. I think good consideration was given to their bids, and we appreciate that. And so it would be our recommendation, if there's no other further questions or anything, that we offer the agreement with our 2 special ed Class A's to Auto Safety House.
I'll move that we approve the purchase of 2 special ed Class A buses from Auto Safety House.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate you very much. 5.4, update on the bond. Mr. Schubert, please.
Well, sir, as you've just realized, we just spent about $1.7 million of bond money on 11 new buses, so thank you for that. Currently, we have put together a list of priority projects, and we are meeting on January 25th with the bond company. Right now, the current plan is to sell those bonds after our current financial audit is completed. So that's why we're looking at a February, March sale date of those bonds. On January 31st, we have a tentative schedule to meet with the community committee. That way we can go ahead and align what we believe our priorities are with what the community believes our priorities should be. So that meeting should take place on or about the 31st of January.
Aren't you also sending out a newsletter monthly?
We're sending out a monthly newsletter, yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Tregaskis, that newsletter can be found on our website. It should be on, if it's not on there now, it will be within the next day or so. Our website company is putting that up there, and it's been sent out to staff and to other community members, including our oversight committee. And so the December newsletter was published, and we will look at the end of January to publish more. I know it seems like we don't have a lot of information on the bond, because when we meet with the bond committee on the the bond company who's going to sell our bonds, we'll have more information about things moving forward. But we're right inside of our timeline that we established in December. We feel like we're moving right along at a good pace through that, and this is just the next step, is selling those bonds.
And the reason we do the buses now is so that we can get them in time for school next year.
Yeah, if we
based off of
didn't-
what he said, right?
If we didn't get the purchase order in place, here, from what the vendors tell us, February becomes a real heavy ordering time. The later that you get, the more you push into the start of school, and we wanted to have those on the first day, not wait till October to throw in new buses in the fleet, so.
Thank you.
Anything else on that? Thank you. Appreciate it. 6.0, consent agenda. Mr. Schubert.
Tonight, we are bringing before you for your approval the following items: ratification of our expense and payroll vouchers, ratification of our junior high and high school activity revenues and expenditures, ratification of food service revenues and expenditures, approval of the regular meeting governing board minutes for December 21st, and approval of the following donations. Shiloh High School received from TNC Appliance, well, let me rephrase this. TNC Appliance donated a used electric stove for the high school special education class. And Owens Livingston donated an assortment of coats for students who need one, and that's to go district-wide. So tonight we bring these before you for your approvals.
I motion for the approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? As always, thank you so much for those donations. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 7.0, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second it.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you so much for coming out. Please drive home safely.